Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. We appreciate you joining us. My name is Isabella Perry, and I'm going to be your moderator. This presentation will be discussing updating your annual food fraud vulnerability assessment, best practices, and updates with Dr. John Spink. So today's presenter, as mentioned, is Dr. John Spink, and Chris Reno will also be joining us. He is the Commercial Business Manager at Perry Johnson Companies. I'm going to go over some quick housekeeping really fast. All attendees are muted for the duration of this presentation. There will be a Q&A at the end where we'll answer any questions that you have for our presenter. Please use the question portion in the GoToWebinar control panel for any issues or questions you may have. The slides and the recording will be available on our website after this presentation. Any additional questions, please contact us through our website for more information. I'm going to run a quick poll for everyone. If you wouldn't mind answering that, that would be awesome. Okay, great. Thank you, everyone. Now, Dr. John Spink will take it away discussing today's topic.
Thank you. I'm really pleased to be back again with PJR. You guys have been great. Always interesting. Even the discussion before, we were on the call for maybe 2 minutes. I got some incredibly deep insights that in hindsight, I guess I could see it happening, but you know, it's really great to hear from people that are right on the ground and so committed to food safety and the customers and the products. So thank you all for me being on here again. It's been about twice a year, I guess, I present. And this presentation actually is a very similar and is an update from one that I did in 2023. It was February, so instead of February, May. So about, you know, a couple years later, and it's good to take a look at it. Lots changed in the world, I guess, to say the least. But what we're going to do is look at updating your annual food fraud vulnerability assessment. A lot of insight. I just got back from the Food Safety Summit last week, so from Sunday to Friday, well beyond the date of the conference, was interacting with a lot of people. So I have some great insight for you. So again, I'm Dr. John Spink. I'm director of the Food Fraud Prevention Academy. I'll go through a little bit of that, but I'm also an assistant professor in the Department of Supply Chain Management at Michigan State. That's in the business college. It's actually unique for a food-focused person to be from the business college. Most times it's food management or food science, you know, food toxicology that kind of moves into the space, but I look purely at the business side of things, including the supply chains. Foodfraudprevention.com is our website. Feel free to look there for anything. Housekeeping was in here, as mentioned. There's in the side there, you can answer questions. The PJR team will look at that and they'll feed them into me. So definitely look at that. Even throughout the session, if there's something that pops up, I'm happy for everybody to pop in. I will have plenty of time for questions at the end. So a little bit first about us, if you don't know, education, outreach, and research, that's a cycle. We live in that cycle. So even like the casual informal conversation before this with the team, I learned a few things. That's outreach. I hear new things. I'm gonna go back and research that a bit. And from there, then we do publications, articles, blog posts, whatever, and that goes into our education to students or other people, and then the cycle continues. For reference, Food Fraud Prevention textbook was published 2019. It's an ongoing endeavor, so it's got a lot of resources. If you're entering the food fraud prevention management world, this is a great resource for you. If not that, then we have massive open online courses. These are free open online courses. The first one was 2013, so we're over 10 years doing these, and they've evolved over time. They're always updated. We have core courses. One that will be important to you from this presentation will be the VASIP MOOC. They're called MOOCs, Massive Open Online Courses. That's the second one, but then there's a lot of other ones that apply. We then have some specialty MOOCs, go into more detail, and like with the vulnerability assessments, as you go to higher level, where you're doing this assessment to present to a CFO or chief risk officer or the owner of a company, then you'd want that enterprise risk management, because it takes this unique food safety, food health, food fraud issue and converts it into business terms. And it sounds really simple, and you're smart people, very highly educated in specific areas, but most likely not in managerial accounting or financial accounting. And so those are things that we've expanded on there. We also, just as a note, if you do anything with USDA, especially with the organic program, we were funded through the Organic Trade Association to create 2 courses. These are courses to train USDA inspectors. So if you're getting inspected by the USDA or by anybody, these are good ones to know about. The goal is not to catch you doing things wrong, or they want to give you all the answers so that you get things in place so you're just compliant. So those are 2 that are on USDA's website. Those are really good ones. So if you're on the elliptical or commuting or something like that, it's a good one. A podcast, you can listen to it like a podcast out on a walk. And then we do professional education and services as well. So if you need more and need to go deeper, then you can always contact us. So, oh boy, artificial intelligence. Is this a 4-letter word? I don't know if it is. It's like, oh my gosh, it is the biggest stress and hype. But it is extremely hyped right now, but also in the same hype sometimes says that it's something that's kind of more important than it is. It is important. And we have a lot going on in our business college. We're supposed to be training students so that in 3 months, if students that are starting my class right now, in 3 months, they might be in the working world. So we have a lot going on with the AI task force that I'm on, leading a lot of innovation. And I think no presentation in 2025 is complete unless it starts with some discussion about AI, possibly how we use it, how we might use it. And that's what I'll start with real briefly here. And again, from the PGR team, feel free to pop in at any time. So first is I presented to the FSPCA. So they're the group that creates the training for the FSMA preventive controls rule. I was presenting to them and I created a great presentation, kind of like this, very detailed, got some really, really nuanced insights that apply specifically to the audience, and also some very, very specific recommendations that make things a lot easier. So I got done with the PowerPoint. I said, wow, this is great. Gosh, how might I use this? Is back in November. So like 2 generations ago in AI, maybe. I thought, well, why don't I use AI? If I got the PowerPoint, why don't I see if it can make a conference proceedings? Just a document, like a 2-3 page document explaining this in detail. So I did. And it was fantastic, absolutely mind blowing in a lot of ways. So artificial intelligence, AI, ChatGPT, Claude is another one, Perplexity, Notebook LM. They provide tremendous opportunities. I mean, like mind blowing. Think about the first time that you or your parents saw color TV or TV itself, or the first time you got on the internet and started searching around. That's what this is. But I will say it provides tremendous opportunities within reason. But what is a reason? We don't know what that scope is until you start to mess with it, play with it. What is reason? And so what I did is I looked back there and looked at things like, citations. So it found great citations. We'll look at those and how much they apply. It talked about supply chain disruptions in this article, solutions for the food industry. That was a pretty great title. And so, right there. Now, what I did find is this article that it produced was not only based on the PowerPoint I created, it also went out to the internet, so it got some general ideas about supply chain disruptions, and it really had too much non-food content in there for the presentation of the audience, and it really over-applied it as well. It insinuated things were in place that it really wasn't yet. The action items and next steps, they were not helpful at all. They were very generic. Know your suppliers, review things. Well, how does that help? So AI is something that summarizes, and it summarizes really the common knowledge. So unless you give it very specific prompts or direction of what those conclusions are, it won't come up with good conclusions. Now, if you know what the conclusions are, and you have the background, that's where I was not as thorough as I should have been, is that I gave it the presentation, but I didn't give it specific conclusions. If you tell it what the specific conclusions are, it might give you more detail. Then the citations, these were fantastic. So this was great. Supply chain vulnerability and resilience by me, great. I mean, that's super applicable. Harvard Business Review, building a resilient supply chain, absolutely fantastic, and Harvard Business Review is one of those leading resources. Another article by me, perfect target, Journal of Food Protection, that's IAFP's journal. Well, right there, mapping risks, tools for strategic supply chain decisions. So look, it's finding incredible citations. Another Harvard Business Review, the agility imperative in supply chain management. So this is great. So whatever it did with the kind of generic on the conclusions or too broad, the citations were fantastic. Not so fast. There's somebody that says that. I don't know. Not so fast. So let's look at this. Oh, well, the first citation doesn't exist. It did what they call hallucinate. It made that up. I don't know what, don't ask me why and how it does that. There's something in the logic that it creates these citations. It didn't realize that citations were a real separate thing. So that, okay, well, all right, one of them didn't exist. But wait, the second one was a blog post from 2007. We're here in 2025. So that's way old. The other article didn't exist, and the last article didn't exist. So again, AI was great. It created this really eloquent, nicely written document, but it didn't hit the key terms. The action items were not helpful. They were generic, and even the citations, the way that it justified its own insights, they were non-existent. So now you're saying, should I use AI at all? You absolutely should use AI, but you need to know what's going on and within what reason. So if you did use AI to say, okay, well, food fraud, I don't understand it. I'm just going to have AI create my food fraud vulnerability assessment and prevention plan. Hopefully by now we're pointing out that things like that are dangerous for you because they are going to be incorrect or misapplied. You don't want to get in front of court or a Senate subcommittee and say that you used AI, and that's why you didn't protect the food supply chain. The confidence in using these documents or the output as is very low. But it still can be fantastic for a lot of other tasks. So when we look back at the paper, where was it really helpful? Now, one thing is when you have an outline or detailed and you have the conclusions, it's great for creating documents or summaries, things like that. So in content analysis, we did find that it missed 10% of the insight because it was more general. It didn't have the confidence to go into that detail. It summarized public, internet, or Wikipedia knowledge, which is fine if you're looking for a general overview to get started on something. Like, who was the best Cincinnati Reds baseball player? That's a good way to start, and then you can do your more detailed knowledge. It often led to incorrect or inefficient recommendations, and their key is that it didn't hit things dead on. Missed new knowledge development, novel approaches, and refined application. AI cannot create new knowledge. It cannot create that innovation because it's based on the past. Now you can direct it to work with you. This is something we found with our students when we're working with them in like case study projects, is that that they had to then themselves think about the new direction. Now you can ask AI questions, but you're then directing it into those new fields. It's a good summary or of a report or a general overview. Fantastic. Summarize this standard or this document, and really a lot of times there's very limited access to data. And Scopus is a database that has the highest level, highest ranked scholarly articles, academic articles. That's what we use when we do research at the highest levels. And even Scopus's own database, even Scopus's own AI system only looked at the abstracts. Well, a very little value. I'd say 90% of the 95% of the value of academic articles is not in the abstract. The abstract is just a summary. So all of a sudden AI is good for some things, but not for others. Pardon me. So now what? So start using it. I would say get one of the, Chat GPT. I think the basic one subscription is like $20 a month. Do it for a month or two. It's funny. The first I went back and I'll do a blog post sometime about the first like 10 internet searches or AI searches. I was doing silly things like create an image of a professor sitting on a dinosaur that's flying over a mountain with flames out of its mouth or whatever, silly things. Or again, like I said, who is the best Cincinnati Reds baseball player? I'm just trying stuff. But you poke around with that kind of stuff, or how to create, what's the best recipe for hot dog roll-ups at home for dinner or something like that. Then you're starting to just learn what it can do and what it can't do. And asking questions about things that you know about is a really good starting point. So then the students are interested, and all of us should be interested. Future job positions. AI will automate a lot of processes. So it's good to know now, sooner rather than later, what AI cannot do and where there will be really the intense needs. I did that as an academic, as a teacher, thinking, hey, if someone could just say AI create a 1-hour overview of all supply chain management as it applies to food fraud, if they can just pop out, why do you need me? Why do you need me to create the content? So I really I'm terrified by it and also inspired. And so I want to know what it is and what it isn't. So let's look at future job positions. And again, our students are that are just graduating are really interested in this, obviously. But again, we are too. Prompt engineering expertise. Okay, so what that is when AI pops up, it's like a text box, like a text message. You're asking it to do something. That's a prompt. And prompt engineering is fascinating, and there's a deep level of expertise. For a certain type of academic writing, I now have a boilerplate of text that I have in a Word document. It's probably 500 or 1,000 words long. Details, do it this way, don't do it that way, make sure to double check this, confirm this, da 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 da. So basically, you ask AI to do something, it does it, and then you ask AI to check itself. And that's crazy. It's just, how do you know to do that? Well, you know that because you're a master of the tool. And so that's the key at the start. When you start to work with AI, you become a master of the tool. You know what it can do, what it can't do. You know how to ask it the questions. You ask it junk questions, and junk will come out of it. I've been absolutely, oh my gosh, I can't explain to see and like with students in class, we did this where we ran a couple research questions or whatever through AI or some of the systems that make PowerPoint presentations. I mean, to see a room of, 3, 5 to 4 point supply chain management business school students already all have jobs, great jobs, to see them absolutely blown away was absolutely phenomenal. But I also knew that we're at the front end of what anybody knows. So the prompt engineering is key, knowing what you can ask and what about it. Curator of proprietary data set or resources. Basically, you as the librarian or with a private source. So an example would that be is if you have, like for me, I have a lot of writing that I've done that's not public. So if I'm writing a chapter, like the chapter I wrote, the presentation I wrote for the FSPCA conference, that's proprietary information. I'm the librarian. I own that information. I have it at my control. I also know which articles to add from like this private source to have the presentation or the document be a really great document. So for you, you might have an analysis, you might have data, you might have old tests, you might have direction or a chapter type thing. So there's going to be more of this need for this really, a really expert librarian, basically, to have the library and be able to apply it. So again, someone asked me for a summary of whatever. I have a lot of great information that I can add to it. Adding that specific information, the source, with my mastery of the tool, all of a sudden things can pop out and be great, and really hit the target. And then the last piece that's critical is expert in AI validation. What I mean by that is master the field, the field you're in. So you can be great at about asking AI to do something, giving it direction. You can have a really phenomenal, very applicable, very unique data set, and the information spits out. But at the end, you need to read it and to see if it really did hit the mark. So again, look at the content analysis first bullet point. Missed the last 10% of insight. That's where me at the end of it, after I've mastered the tool, got a great output, had the great resources in there, I now will read it and to see where it hasn't hit the target in that last 10%. And then I will go back and ask AI to redo it, or I'll rewrite that conclusion or that section. So future jobs are, number one, all the things here is to know what AI is, to be using it so that you're familiar with it, with the tool. With that, you'll be able to start to master it. You'll start to see what information is valuable. And then about you applying your expertise in the field. There absolutely has to be an expert reviewer at the end to know if things really are applicable.
Yeah. So, John,
Yes.
I've got a question. So, in a practical sense of a QA environment, what do I know this is we're still laying the framework for a lot of these things, right? So
Right.
anything that we're talking about is sort of in the future. But do you see QA teams having their own, tool expert on staff? or the first iteration, what does that look like? Is it more that companies have an engineer and then that engineer just sort of works on projects for each
Yeah.
department as it comes up?
Interesting question. And so at the Food Safety Summit, there were a couple companies that were talking about what they were doing in QA, FSQA, about food fraud. And it really was data scientists that had been in their teams that were then applying AI. So if you've got data and you're doing data analysis, AI just automates the process. So that's really the data analysis people. But really what we see from the other end of that is, so I'm going to write this down, data analysts. And the other end is students. So we're equipping our students. Every supply chain management student now has an awareness of using AI and how to use it. So they're going to have some data sets they're analyzing for economic order quantity or trends in extraneous matter or something. They're just going to know what, instead of just using Excel and analyzing it themselves, they're going to start using AI. That's in a very informal sense at one end. So what do I see happening? I see that AI will be very formally engaged, such as actual systems that will gather from multiple databases, and then also see people will use it in every day for every single thing that they do. I mean, I now, every time I write a report or a blog post, I ask AI to review it for flow, thought, and concepts. So we'll see a wide range of it. It's not like AI is one. It's not just a simple a hammer of one kind. There's a lot of parts of it. So it's going to be everywhere, and it's going to speed up a lot of things that we do. Example would be like looking at data sets of, let's say, FSQ, food safety and quality data across the company. Is that right now those are a lot of times in very different systems and very different formats, and now let's say there's 3 systems and they have different categories. So one has food and beverage, and one has food ingredients, beverage, and alcoholic spirits. Those are 3 different data sets with columns in there. You'd have to then split that out yourself manually. You could ask AI, you just make a PDF of these files, say, AI, here's the categories, convert number 1 into the category, convert number 2 into the category, convert number 3, and now combine them together. So that kind of thing where you wouldn't need to have one system, you'd be able to ask AI to do it.
Well, and the idea of using the benchmarking, and just being able to really quantify that much data in a short amount of time and make some really actionable, decisions from it, whether that's through, new training programs or even new procurement sources, right? If your costs are getting out of control. So I think that, it's like you said in the beginning, there's a lot to be scared of, but also a lot that's really inspiring. I think for a lot of our audience and, folks that are in the manufacturing environment, it does seem like this tool that we all need to learn how to use. I think that it's just, where do you begin, and what's really the first step. So, I'll be interested to follow some of your content, moving forward, as you guys continuously, flesh out all the new technology and new buzzwords around it. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, we stay in touch anyway, and so we'll keep talking about that. My recommendation from AI is just start to play with it. Like I feel like I'm a 3rd grader in this. I think that my expertise and my level is about 3rd grade, but I know more than a baby. I know more than 1st graders, and that's the way that you start. So it sounds really silly, but just open it up, and on your home computer or whatever, so it's not through the work info, but just start to just you see the things there and ask. Like the image programs have been great, make funny cartoons. That sounds like it's a waste of time, but it's you just getting familiar with it. And all of a sudden later I see people say, oh wait, I could use it for this or that. That's exactly it. You just need to know what it is. You need to pick it up and play with it. Again, we're 3rd graders. So the analogy I use is that I feel like I used to be with just a pencil and paper drawing pictures, and someone just gave me color crayons. I'm going crazy. It's so unbelievable. Color, it's like, wow. I mean, that's the way that I feel sometimes when I'm looking at it. And it sounds so goofy, but it is absolutely mind expanding it's an existential experience to see some of this stuff. So I think that's it, just to start to look at it. And then along the time, the way when you're working on your own tasks, occasionally you say, hey, I wonder if AI could do this. And that's exactly the moment you want to get yourself to that moment. Well, since you asked, I'll share, and I promise I'll get back on the content. But I developed I was teaching a class for the first time on negotiations, and we used case studies. So I was sitting around, it was the day before, and it was about 9 o'clock at night, and I figured, okay, probably 3 hours, take me 3 hours. So about midnight, I'll go to bed. So I started to write the case study, and apply it and adjust it. And I thought, wait a second, why don't I ask AI? And I thought, well, what do I want to ask it? I said, well, please create a case study for groups of 4, that'll be four students negotiating with 4 students in this topic, have this be a problem, have this and that, enter. I tell you no lie, it was 10 seconds and this fantastic thorough case study popped out. How did it know how to do it? I have no idea, but I also don't know how cable TV does what it does, I guess, in detail. So it just spit out, and that was a key moment where I had played with it enough that I thought at that moment, hey, maybe I could ask AI to do this. And that was phenomenal. So like organizing massive amounts of data, think about that. If you have a huge data set and you're going to different locations of the same company, you could just add one place they make bread and the other place they make muffins. Then you can just ask AI, instead of you doing the interpretation, you can ask AI, hey, look at this from the perspective of muffin making rather than bread making. And all of a sudden that'll be that breakthrough for you. So please pop in with that as well. It sounds so informal, but that's, I think, that's the way I got started, and that's the way a lot of people get started. At this point, I now know the more detailed questions to ask, like being able to define, master the tool, be the librarian, and the AI validation expert. And so that's just good to know in advance.
Well, and we talk to a lot of folks, of course, that are in the GFSI world that are all, constantly looking for things like their food safety meetings. Hey, we're looking for new content for, our monthly meetings. We've been talking about these same things over and over. So, I think that it does provide a lot of insights because, like you mentioned earlier, it is going to aggregate a lot of the things that are out there on the internet. So, of course, you're checking your sources to make sure that it's all legit, but I think that it is a really great opportunity to save some time in some areas that you can, of course, then rededicate, to other food safety objectives.
Oh, that's 100% it. Even for me, well, maybe a couple examples are good. Like I said about the case studies, obviously you're not making case studies, but that could be a summary of a project for somebody. But one thing, so food fraud is my research area, and I'm interested in what are all the articles that have come out in the last quarter. I want to know who's working on it, what are they working on, what are the insights, who do I want to contact, maybe how do I want to use the best practices for my research. And that was always a task that was just too daunting because there could be 300 articles specifically on food fraud that apply to my work every quarter, every 3 months. So to go get the articles and read them and summarize them and coordinate them and cross-reference them, that would be a week of work. And it just definitely is not worth my time for that. But at the same time, I felt like I was really missing out on a lot of the new topics. Grad students will read every article. I don't have the time to do that. But now realizing if I'm inside the Google system, the Google whatever Galaxy that has Google Scholar, I can just ask it. I've now got a prompt, and it asks the question, please list all the articles that have food fraud and prevention or management in the keywords, title, abstract. Enter. It spits out. And even with that, I can ask more detailed questions. So something that was going to take me a week to organize the raw data takes me, a minute maybe. And now that I've got a good prompt, it can bring that up. Now I still need to go if they find there's like 3 articles or 3 authors that are excellent, I'll then ask it of the top, pick out the top 3, write a 300-word summary of this. I still go back and read the article to see that it does apply, but wow, that gets me 95% of the way there. So instead of having a week, 5 full days of work, I now have about an hour. And I can then quarterly review everything, and that's really valuable to me. I'm still evolving that concept, but it's fabulous. That's the kind of thing that it can do, where it can take massive amounts of information and then consolidate it. Now you need to know, in that case, I needed to be really good at the prompt, what I could ask it, how I needed to ask it to get the information I wanted in there, and I probably had 20 iterations of the question, of the prompt, because it was not working. And so it took me a long time to figure out how to do it. And then the data's in there. So I'm kind of librarian. I've now got this information source. And then with the output, I had to be really clear and review what I was asking and what the output was. But it's really getting me there for the question that I had. Again, looking for what are the trends in food fraud research over the last quarter, and then later really asking how does that align with my work, and you know, I can then see where we might need to change some things to have the best practices in there. So there's tremendous opportunity, and it takes a little while. And at the beginning, like anything new, you're learning it. So it took me 10 times longer to write the prompt and get there the first time. But remember, the second time, I probably have an hour worth of work total. From the time I push the button to search next quarter, review a couple articles, update it, it's only an hour. And I've got myself so far ahead in the field. It's absolutely mind-numbing. Whew. All right. Yeah, we'll see about that. So anyway, back to regular programming. So what we do see in the trends for food fraud is the nature of the world marketplace is a shift to constant supply chain disruptions and emerging risks. The world is going to be changing and changing faster. And a lot of times we, you know, fight, flee, or freeze. A lot of us are freezing right now because it's just too overwhelming. But we really do need to keep watching it, or your company could get hit with something and be out of business. It lends to the need to build systems to not only fix current problems, but to become resilient to everything and anything and all the time. So in the past, those board of directors of companies, a problem occurred in food safety, and you went to them and they said, fix it. Tell us when it's fixed. That's one thing. It's like a broken leg. But it's not like a broken leg anymore. It's more like diabetes. And diabetes, you don't fix diabetes, you manage it. And so that's looking at how you receive product, how you monitor product, how you monitor those suppliers. I would say audits, inspections, and processes, prevention methods have never been more important, because they create an underlying system that builds resilience. And that's what's needed. And that's what we hear from the board of directors, the vice presidents of food safety or quality that were at the Food Safety Summit last week. That's what they're talking about. So next, supply chain disruptions are now a top-down matter, meaning that the entire enterprise is looking at how your business operates and where disruptions could occur. And they define the impact on the entire enterprise, not just one product or one problem at a time. The resource allocation decision-making is based on and defined by quantitative analytical risk tolerance. So every company does have a risk tolerance, and within that, that includes agencies. But really, we've been doing this with HACCP in the past. And there is a point where you feel and you know in HACCP that something's too dangerous. That's something we can still apply just in kind of a broader sense. And we apply that then to supply chain disruptions, which is looking at a system that compares us to everything. So if you think about a food safety instance defined as a disruption, a possible source of a disruption, now we're talking really strategic from a business standpoint. No longer just this one issue that was one problem and needs to be fixed. It's now a part of the entire enterprise. So the update from the field, and this was just, I mean, this is Michigan Department of Ag, FFVA, and others I've been updating on. So first thing is Codex Alimentarius. That really doesn't impact people directly. It's more indirect, but Codex is the World Food Code, and a lot of countries, say the 80 smaller countries in the world, 100 smaller countries in the world, use this as their food law or as a base of their food law. Regarding food fraud, they have a definition that they're creating and a strategic focus, and it's the same as what we've been looking at all along. The GFSI type concepts apply. You know, all types of fraud, all types of products, and prevention. So with that is around the world, wherever you sell, wherever you get product from, there's a common focus on food fraud, and with this definition, it'll just be clearer, more sane, more logical, more coordinated when we're looking at preventing food fraud. ISO 22000 is something you may not know anything about, international standards. ISO 22000 is food safety management, and that is the core of GFSI, is based off ISO 22000. That kind of is a circle where GFSI was working, and 22,000 was going on, and food safety standards around. That's the core. They finalized the definition, had a discussion on the 6th, and we'll start voting on that. So again, we've got more formalizing of food fraud as a concept, and that's just going to lead more logical, rational approach to addressing food fraud, which fortunately is consistent with everything we all have been talking to you about over the years. In Europe, there's a European food fraud community of practice. I'm in this. It's looking more formally at addressing food fraud across Europe. Again, just formalizing our process, a rational approach. Food fraud is something that's going to be, the management systems are going to be asked of you. They're going to be reviewed. And so there's just a common approach. Industry, we definitely see the GFSI type standards expanding. BRC, IFS, and others have new vulnerability assessment guidance, either coming out or soon to come out. We see specialty groups like the Peanut and Tree Nut Producers Association. They asked me, and I presented a food fraud vulnerability assessment chapter, giving direct recommendations for their industry. So again, food fraud is really coming, and it's important, and it's going to be more significant for you. In general, the World Trade Organization also had some research in this area. The thing with that is that they just it's all the same basic concepts. They looked and used our definition of food fraud. The WTO focuses more on counterfeiting or big time smuggling, but still, what we see is around the world, food fraud is just becoming more formalized as a concept. Call to action. This is really the same as it was in 2023, which is great. And there's that original food fraud audit guide MOOC was 2017 that's on there. Same things going on. We'll get to these very prescriptive recommendations. Fully implement what was recommended back in 2019 and 2023. So a lot of times people have done a food fraud vulnerability assessment on a couple products, but not their entire product slate. That's what we see companies doing right now, saying, yeah, we're really good at these few products, but we haven't looked at the entire company. And there's something we'll show you that's pretty simple for that. It's the same as our audit guide from way back when. When we first created the food fraud audit guide MOOC, the recommendations are exactly the same. The direction, the issues are the same as back then. We've only really refined with updates of some of the legislation numbers, but the basic concepts are the same, which is great because whatever you did then or whatever you did for specific products is still applicable. But now really do it, and do it for all products, which sounds crazy. We did the entire country of Trinidad and Tobago in 4 hours, all incoming goods, all outgoing goods. You say, well, they're a small country. Yeah, but they have real grocery stores there. They have a gross domestic product, export product. So we could do a whole country in 4 hours. During the Food Safety Summit, we had a workshop, and a multinational food company did their initial screening in about an hour. Now, it's not very detailed yet. It's really just got a high level perspective, but at least they did it. And now they did see some areas where they maybe should look a little bit more in detail. So it can happen. We'll expand on the lessons learned here. The GFSI Foundation. So just as a reminder, the GFSI created the document, the benchmarking document back in 2017. That was when food fraud was defined as coming to be a requirement. In January 2018, addressing food fraud, all products, that's from ingredients to finished goods, all types of fraud is a requirement. Now, the question is, how thorough have the inspections or audits or responses been? They're evolving, but it was required back then. Really a ramp up in 2019. Second annual audits were getting ready for in 2020. What happened then? COVID. So all of a sudden, people were doing process improvement, and then they got overwhelmed and didn't do much for a while. Usually it's about 2 years for a new idea to really get going, because you do it once, the second time is when you start to go to detail. And then jumped ahead to September 2021, kind of out of COVID maybe, back to business in January 2022. And so here we are, a couple, years after that, but all of a sudden, we've had other things going on in that time period. Look at Ukraine, Russia, just all the different actions and issues going on around the world that now lead us. The key is this idea of companies are trying to figure out their the way that they look at inherent disruptions and variance or vulnerability across their entire company. And we see that all these food fraud prevention concepts apply there. So are you ready for that really full GFSI audit or controlling your company, and how sure are you? That's a good starting point for a question. And then how do you conduct that self-assessment? And we've got a gap analysis that's the second to last slide here. So we'll give you a very, very simple first step. Just to remind you, there's 3 types of audits. Of the audit that occurs, auditor asks no questions about food fraud. Auditor asks some questions. Auditor asks all the questions. So for us, a recommendation is to look at your audits because you might have passed, but did you really meet the requirement? So go back and look at those previous audits, just the food fraud section, and look at the thoroughness of that detail. Also, what were the comments and what were your responses? You should know and communicate this internally. And what we've got here is, number one is we do know that the goal is just to pass the audit at the start. So you may have passed the audit. But again, looking at it to say, did you meet all the requirements? And did you meet other compliance requirements? There's other food safety or customs, financial reporting. If you sell to McDonald's or Costco or other people, they have specialty additional requirements, just to look at that in more detail. And then internal compliance. So there's going to be, at some point, especially now, we see from the board looking at the business to say, yeah, we need to look at this more closely, or all of our product, and do enough for your managers. So those audits you may have passed, but if you look at the details, you might not be fully compliant. GFSI, just as a reminder, all products, all types of fraud for your entire company. That's a requirement. It doesn't say much in here in the GFSI requirements, very few words there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 23 words in the first assignment, or the first requirement for a vulnerability assessment. But a key there, it does explain for all products across your company. So there's the GFSI most basic concept. This is what's the core for the food safety standards, like IFS, SQF, FSSC 22000, BRC, and others. So food fraud has grown up. And right here is the question for yourself. And so what I wanted to do is, and just to let the presenters know, or the coordinators know, I'll be done with plenty of time to have questions at the end. So for yourself, if you go back and look at these slides, you have a quick pencil here. Ask a couple questions. Number one, have you conducted a food fraud vulnerability assessment? At least one. Is it written? One thing I might ask, on a scale of 1 to 10, how proud would you be to show me that in writing, or your CFO? Have you created a food fraud prevention strategy? The question there is it written? A lot of people say, oh yeah, our strategy is da 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 da. And I ask, can I read it? Oh no, it's not written. That's a problem. That's a problem for audits as well. Demonstrate implementation. Can you demonstrate it? Do you have meeting notes? Do you have activities, project activity, executive level sign off? So as someone that's an officer of your company approved this or reviewed it, that's a big one. And that's, especially if you're asking suppliers this, that shows that this is formal and really been reviewed and is a solid document. 7, minimally conduct an annual food fraud incident review. Have you conducted a food fraud incident review for all your products? Well, probably not. You might have looked at, Googled, searched a couple things, or looked in some databases for a couple things, but probably not for your entire product slate. That's a big miss. Number 8, review. Do you have a method to review your incidents or general market incidents? So if something comes up that is food fraud or suspicious of food fraud, do you have a process, a set of steps that you ask to go through and review it? You probably don't. A lot of people don't. What we see there is that when the next incident does occur, write down document your own process, because then you'll have something to have again, process improvement. And then just to confirm, do you cover all types of fraud? A lot of companies don't cover stolen goods or counterfeits or things like that, which are a problem, which are required by GFSI. And also, does your review cover all products from incoming goods, outgoing goods, through to the consumer, all the way to consumer? Now, a lot of people are ingredient food safety and quality, and that's what you cover, but your company didn't, other people cover those other areas. Technically, you're compliant in your area, but your company's not compliant. Think about it. When you buy product from a company, you don't just want them to have good quality control of their ingredients. You want the quality control of the manufacturing process and the distribution process, the shipping. You want all the product in the marketplace. When you buy it, you just don't have to worry about it. You're not only asking the specific questions, you're looking at the big picture. And your customers also are demanding that of you. And by the way, that's also GFSI compliance. Actually, for the coordinators here, maybe sometime we have another webinar where we go through each one of these for the entire time period. That might be good to go through, even like an active workshop for the attendees. So how to get that overall company level concept to be applied. So here's a hierarchy of assessments. At the very top is your corporation with your corporate risk appetite. So your corporation, either the owner, the board of directors, the risk committee, the CFO, the president of the division, makes this decision of how much risk your business needs to have in place. Enterprise risk management is a process that does manage that. That's managerial accounting, financial accounting, Sarbanes-Oxley regulations. It's out there in the world. It's a real thing. Whether you know about it or not, it's the way that companies are compliant with financial laws. Now, under that are two types of assessments. One's a pre-filter or initial screening. That could be you and me sitting down together. That was the two people from a multinational food company in the workshop sitting together and doing this assessment for themselves. That it can be an initial screening. It's defined as very, very informal. And then you work your way over to the right to much, much more details where you then have the full complete assessment that's a regulatory compliance approved or your company approved. Now below that could be some specialty assessments that cover things in more detail, such as US Pharmacopoeia has an adulterant substance ingredient vulnerability assessment. So that's a hierarchy, and then those all fit together on a corporate risk map, and all those assessments go in and help the company decide where they are from a sense of a corporate risk appetite. This is the trend right now. This is the key, is going to this initial screening concept. And that's a very high level. So, I mean, you look on the right, if we covered this, or in class, people did this again last week, is that now it's just two of us working on it, only with information in our head. But look, I'm a food fraud prevention expert. You're an expert on your company. So it's not like we just came off the streets to look at this. But if you look at a chart like this, there's 4 items in that top orange zone. You now looked across your entire enterprise and you know which 4 ones to at least review at the start. Hopefully those are 4, as well as a couple of the other ones that you already have deep reviews in, so you wouldn't have to go deeper, but maybe there's a couple of them that you really haven't done yet. And that's the key with the initial screening, is to look at that. Just to note that there are resources, free resources. We have a 4-hour MOOC on this, the vulnerability assessment MOOC. So if you do feel like you want to have more, there's short videos, but there's also more as well. I don't just want to talk to you about what you should be doing without giving you some way to achieve it. And then also, this is was published in an academic journal article. The only thing important there is that there's a citation. So if someone says, yeah, or if you do this initial screening, you have a citation. That's why we created this article. Takeaways. So before I've got three key takeaways, and then from this we'll be open for discussion as long as you want. I'll be out. Actually, we got dinner at 5 o'clock in about 3 hours, so I've got that somebody cut off.
These are also, you're on summer break already.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, still teaching the summer, but online. So these were hot questions that have come up at the Food Safety Summit, but also in meetings with agencies or more official groups. So it's interesting to see what questions people ask. So when there is a suspected food fraud incident or vulnerability concern, the key at the very beginning, if you have this idea of this initial screening of the vulnerability assessments in place, if there is suspected food fraud, first conduct a food fraud vulnerability assessment. Because start with this overall initial screening to just recalibrate, to understand what you're thinking about. Because even though the global vulnerability may be high, your likelihood may be low, possibly due to countermeasures or some inherent quality control monitoring. So there was a company I worked with that did nut allergen testing on ingredients that came in, blends. They also did nut allergen testing on the finished product before it was released, because they sold a certain amount of their product to sensitive populations, into hospitals, into elder care, and into like nurseries for kids. So when peanut allergen was in cumin as a food fraud event, they were fine. The global vulnerability was high, but then they realized when we talked to them, they really didn't need to do anything other than confirm that they had done the allergen test, review the allergen test that they had done. But when they did see that their allergen test didn't show anything, so they were good. So you want to do that initial screening first. Also, the likelihood could be high, but the consequence could be minimal. Horse meat and beef, that's bad, that's illegal, but the horse that was put in the system in the UK that was blended in illegally, food fraud, the horse was actually for human consumption. So that horse didn't have, it was food grade horse meat in there. Still, what a lot of people think is gross, not what was in there, it's fraud, but the consequence was actually, from a public health threat, was minimal. They still did recalls. So you want to have this initial screening. You don't want to have every food fraud vulnerability assessment to be some big, complex 2-month-long event activity. You want to have the initial screening so you can calibrate it. That also allows you to do that for your entire company to look at it. And then there's probably something significant that you overlooked. Pretty much every time we do an initial screening, there's something really significant that people overlooked. Then e-commerce and online concerns. Be aware of that. This whole idea of omni-channel, where consumers are getting product and ordering it from anywhere, shipped anywhere by any way. There's a lot of fuzziness of statutory and regulatory boundaries or controls. So that's product that may be outside your control. Whether that product sits outside of refrigeration for a day as it's being delivered, you never know. Do a food fraud vulnerability assessment to look at the scope of your problem. Again, if you do this initial screening, you can do that pretty quickly at the start. And then prevention is key. That's the last thing. In everything that we do with food fraud, we want to be thinking about prevention. You want to do these quick reviews at the highest level. You want to review audit reports. You want to monitor the most recent, the trends in audit reports, that they're being conducted. You want to look at what's happening in the world, like the peanut allergy and cumin, to see what's going on so that you know if you are really having a vulnerability. So with that, open it for questions to anybody, and I thank you for your time. And please contact me if you have any questions or new areas where you'd like us to expand.
Yeah, fantastic presentation, John, as always. So I did have one question. You touched on it a little bit earlier with the expanded definitions for food fraud, out in the world. So on the last slide you showed, not to specifically pick on e-commerce, but just because that was the heading, kind of this sketchy regulatory environment, right? With the boundaries and who do you go after if there is, breach in contract, breach in food safety, or in food fraud. So does that strengthening of the definition on a global level, where they're going to start, having very similar definition for all these major countries, will you see that as a consequence of that being better for the consumers, because now your company could potentially go out in the world court and recover some sort of means? So maybe companies will be a little less likely to try some sort of adulterant in the future.
Yeah, I think the big key is it's just defined. So you get the news and says you should worry about this, you should worry about that. Like you get that all the time, but all of a sudden when your doctor says, or your accountant sends you a note to say look out for this, look out for that, now you know it's something real. So I think that's one thing we'll see, is that food fraud is becoming real, and then ultimately whether it's e-commerce, a website, a e-commerce platform, they want to be trusted. And as this becomes defined as a thing and it starts to be defined as a problem and people are aware of it, then consumers may shy away from buying product through a certain source. So I think at this point, like with AI, we need to just start to look at it, and really it's case by case to see what's going on and what the concerns are. I do emphasize, every time you think something is a problem, don't immediately start acting. Don't immediately start freaking out. You have a little mole on your neck, a little rash. Don't like all of a sudden sell all your goods and give your money away because you think you're dying in a week. Go to the doctor, and most likely it's just a little rash and it'll go away. And that's the same thing with this. Is as soon as you see something, the mindset should be, let's do a FFIS. Let's do an initial screening. What does this look like? What's the likelihood? What's the consequence? What do we know about it? We have a whole field of study that we're expanding on, intelligence analysis. That's judging the information that's coming in, the information type and source. That's all from like Interpol, FBI, things like that, the way they look at information coming in. And the other is document fraud. is the documents that come in that could be fraudulent, or not necessarily fraudulent, but could be erroneous, not explaining what it is. So in everything that we do, so e-commerce is just there's no guardrails a lot of times, but at the same time, with all these things, get in the mindset of just doing an assessment first.
Well, and excuse me, you talked a little bit at the beginning when you're talking about the MOOCs, the organic NOP as well. We saw this last year some new enforcement, some sort of strengthening of some of the NOP rules with things like importations, countries that maybe we were reciprocal before, we don't anymore. And so really just strengthening that up. And, as a sales guy on this side of it, right, I'm the one talking to a lot of these customers that are now getting grouped into this new rule. And, at first I thought that I was going to get a lot of pushback. I was going to hear a lot of them saying things like, oh, well, you guys, more regulatory oversight, right? But I was really kind of surprised to hear a lot of those customers saying, well, this is going to weed out, the folks that aren't doing it right. I'm confident where I'm getting my products from. I know my supply chain. We just haven't been forced to do this. But they understand the rule and the meaning, and sort of the greater good for it, and how it will start to knock off some guys that maybe aren't doing things by the book. So we don't always love when there are regulatory changes, in this environment, but I think we can all agree that food fraud is one of those areas where anything that, can be done to strengthen that up and keep the consumers and, your bottom line safer is obviously, going to be good for the whole industry. So it looks like we don't have any additional questions from the audience, so we're finishing up a few minutes early, let you get on to that summer break. So, John, always appreciate it. Thank you again for your time today. If any of the members have, audience members have any questions after the conclusion of today's presentation, please reach out directly to Dr. John Spink through the Food Fraud Prevention Academy. Reach out to Perry Johnson Food Safety with any certification questions, and we'll leave that with you for today. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you, everybody. Take care.